That's it.
So it's the same,
Absolutely true.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, tell everyone. Very good Erev Shabbat Agadol. The parsha of the week is Mitzorah. It concludes the two parshiot, Tazria and Mitzorah, that deal with the plague of sarat and the fact that the person who suffers from it becomes tome. Now, we have no concept of what tome is. It's a state of impurity. A person that's tome is not allowed to enter the Beit HaMikdash. Later generations, there were those that were so severe that they felt that someone who is tome, a certain type of tuma, should not receive an aliyah. The custom that exists in many Ashkenazi communities in the exile, that on Shabbat, the Kohanim, even though it's Yom Tov, do not duchim, do not bless the people, stems from the fact that there's a presumption that those Kohanim are tamei, that they're impure. So it has consequences, but it really has no definition for us, because all of us are tamei for various reasons. You live outside Eretz Yisrael, you're automatically tamei. There are various reasons for tuma, and the process of tahara requires the ashes and the water of the porah aduma, of the red heifer, and we don't have a porah aduma. So therefore, it's, so to speak, incurable. We cannot get out of it. However, there is a moral lesson to tuma, and the moral lesson is reflected in the laws that pertain to someone who has sarat. One lesson is that the person who has sarat should be separated from the general community until the sarat is healed and the proper sacrifices are offered. So many people think that this is because sarat is a communicable disease, and therefore separating the person is to avoid contaminating others who are healthy. I think that this was the reason why for many centuries people wrongfully believed that sarat was leprosy. And they felt that leprosy was a very communicable disease, and therefore there were leper colonies that existed in the world where people who tragically suffered from leprosy were banished to live there, could not live in the community because they felt that it was very contagious, communicable, etc. In our time, medicine has seen different approaches to the matter, so that most of that is not relevant today at all. But sarat is not leprosy. Basically, we know what sarat isn't. We don't know what sarat is. So one of the aspects of sarat was that the person lived in isolation or lived with other Mitzoraim. When Mitzorah falls on a regular Shabbat, not on Shabbat Agadol, so we read the Haftorah of the four lepers, of the four people who had sarat, Gehazi and his three sons, who lived together, but were not allowed to come within the city of Shomron. So that's one aspect. One aspect is isolation. Now, how do we view isolation? We can view it as a punishment. But there are people who like isolation. They turn off the telephone. They're not interested in what others have to say. They're not really interested to communicate with others. In the medieval world, that was really a part of the Christian religion. Monasteries, convents, that shut these people off from any contact with human beings. And they were supposed to become holy by the fact they were not contaminated by other people who came and told them what the Yankees did. So, is isolation a punishment? Well, for some, maybe. The Gemara says on Choni Amagel, the great Choni, who had great influence in heaven, could regulate the rain, that he went to sleep for many years. And when he awoke to a different world. They could not find themselves comfortable in that new world. And he asked that heaven take him. He said, oh, that Rusa, oh, Misusa, either give me a society in which I feel I can function, I can relate to that society. But if it's a society that I cannot at all relate to, so then it's the end of life, then forget it. So to him, isolation was not only punishment, isolation was the end of life itself. So there's a debate amongst all of the commentators whether the isolation of the Mitzorah is a punishment for him, or whether it's simply a matter of protection of others, or that somehow it's a state of being called tuma that has consequences. Now, the Torah continued. Torah said it wasn't sufficient that he should become Tomei, that he should be in this state of impurity, but that he has to proclaim it. Tomei, Tomei Yikoe. Wherever he goes, he has to shout and announce, I am Tomei, I am Tomei, I am Tomei. Tuma is here. Now that's a strange thing, because we have other principles in Judaism. One of the principles is that if a person, God forbid, sins and wants to do tshuva, wants to repent for what he did, he should not announce it publicly. Because the announcement of sin itself publicly engenders sin in others. It's like a pornographic movie. Nobody's doing anything, but it creates sin. So therefore, one should be silent about one's sins and do tshuva privately, speak to God, because that's where tshuva will help. And God hears whispers. He doesn't have to hear shouting. You don't have to take an ad in the paper and say, I'm guilty of this or that. The exception is on Yom Kippur, when we admit our sins publicly. But even then, the individual admits his sin within the context of others, with the general context of sin. So why should he announce that he's Tomei? And that seems to fly in the face of the idea that we don't want to proclaim tuma. Because if he announces Tomei, then people will talk about tuma. Oh, did you hear Yossel? Yossel said he's Tomei. Oh, Tomei. How did he come Tomei? So then the whole discussion is about tuma. We don't want that discussion to occur. So why should he have to proclaim it? We see from here an important thing, that the Torah monitors, so to speak, our conversation. What do we talk about? So if you talk about good things, so that it helps strengthen the goodness within you. If you talk about bad things, so in our time, for instance, the news is always bad, even when it's good. So we're always talking about bad things. So we're always depressed. It's no good. The government's no good. The officers are not good. The army is no good. Nothing is good. You know, there's an old joke that parents had a child, and the child was 5 years old and hadn't spoken a word yet. And the parents had taken the child to all the speech therapists and all of the social workers, and he didn't say a word. One day, the mother was serving the child oatmeal porridge, and the child said, "Mama, it's too hot." Well, the mother sprang from joy. She called up her husband at work. She said, Johnny spoke. He said, the porridge is too hot. And then after she calmed down a little, she said to Johnny, "How come you didn't say anything until now?" And he said, "Because it wasn't too hot." So what does a person do with speech? That's a central point in Judaism. Tome, ikore. If you announce tuma, that's negative, because it causes other people to think about tuma. There's a story that the Chafetz Chaim hired a man with a horse and wagon to take him from one town to another. And the man driving the horse was unaware of who his passenger was. So he began to discuss with the Chafetz Chaim the horse. Was the horse, he wants to get a new horse. How do you get a horse? And talked about a horse for an hour. When they came to the town, so he saw there was a large crowd waiting to welcome the Chafetz Chaim, and he realized who his passenger was. So he ran up to him and apologized. He said, "Rebbe, I'm sorry, and I nudged you for a whole hour about a horse, and I didn't realize." The Chafetz Chaim said, "It's wonderful. If we would have talked about people, there would be lashon hara. You talk about a horse, there's no problem. There's no lashon hara on a horse." So that viewpoint of what a person says is very strong in Judaism. Nevertheless, we see here that the Torah requires him to say, "Tome, tome." The Torah requires him to say that he is impure. And announcing impurity automatically brings those who hear it to think about impurity. If you read all the gory details of a murder, so there's a piece of you that identifies with the action of the murderer. That's why it says in the Torah that the Lord said, "The kol d'mei achecha tzoakim elam." It's not just the blood that shouts to God, it's the noise the blood makes, the influence that it has upon others. Cain showed that you can get away killing people. Until he killed Hevel, there was no concept of taking a human life. Afterwards, it became necessary almost. So, Chaim v'moves biyad aloshon, how a person speaks is a matter of life and death. So why would the Torah want that the Metzorah should say that he is Tomei? So some of the commentators say that since the cause of sarat the spiritual cause, because this is a spiritual disease. The spiritual cause of sarat is lashon hara, is evil speech. Since he got into this problem by speaking badly, so the only way he can start crawling out is to realize what speech does. And therefore he has to announce that he is tome, because by announcing that, people will stay away from him. He'll suffer consequences. So therefore he'll come to a realization as to the lethal aspects of speech. To be careful what you say, because you don't know the consequences. And that's why Chazal always emphasize silence as being a great and good trait. I remember I had a young man in the yeshiva, and he was going out with this wonderful girl. She came from a wonderful family, and I thought it was a perfect match. You know, Baruch Hashem, over the last 60 years, I have been unsuccessful in every match that I proposed. My wife is good at it, and anyway. So after a period of time, I said to the young man, I said, well, why don't you, pull the trigger? And he said, I'm very hesitant. I said, what's the problem? He said, the problem is she's very quiet. I said, grab her. But in our world, very quiet is not a positive trait. We like gregarious people. So therefore, that's why it says, tome yikore. What the person says brings the tuma. He brought it on himself. It's not a contagious disease. It's not leprosy. It's not COVID-20. He brought it on himself. He said tome. He said tome. He became tome. Therefore, in life, we find this to be so true. One of the things that they teach you in law school in the course on evidence is how to impeach a witness, how to discredit a witness. And the main tactic is to show the contradictions as to what he once said and what he says now. Now, if he's a politician, it doesn't mean anything. But by ordinary people, if he once said A, and now he says B, so you can discredit his testimony because of the fact that's not what he said. So the whole basis of sarat, the whole basis of tuma lies in speech and what a person says. And therefore can only be corrected through speech. So the isolation brings him to silence. He has nobody to talk to. So in our time, it's almost impossible to achieve isolation because of the electronic communications that we have handy. You don't need people. Which can be annoying. But nevertheless, there's an isolation not to talk to a person, not to see someone face to face. I know for myself a very bad example, but that whenever I speak on Zoom alone, I am never comfortable. But when I see human beings in front of me, you're never comfortable. But there's something to it because that's human nature. It's the way people are. People respond to people. People respond to human speech. And therefore, the realization that speech can make me impure, can have an adverse effect upon me and others, that I have to be isolated because of it, that I even have to be afflicted because of it. That's an important lesson in life. The Torah does not want us to be isolated, and the Torah does not want us to be mute people. But the Torah does want us to be careful, to be aware. I used to, the senior partner in the law firm that I worked for had a sign in his desk that said, "Do not engage mouth unless brain is in gear." It was a great lesson. It's the difference between a great professional and others. And it's a gift. And the Torah wants us to have that gift. And therefore, it is constructed this entire elaborate system of Matzorah in order to emphasize that point. How do you speak? What do you say? Did you think before you said it? Do you respond without thought? It has to be measured. That's a great lesson that all of us can learn in life. So I want to wish you all a great Shabbat HaGadol and Chag Kosher V'Sameach. God willing, I hope to go to America for a few weeks. So when I come back, we hope to resume in B'Yirtzeh Hashem. Thank you for coming, and Kol Tuv Selah. Speech.